About a month ago, Apple announced 2 editions of the Apple Watch Series 10,
Apple Watch Series 10.
with each being a full millimeter larger and a slightly wider shape when compared to the previous editions. And if you're a big guy with large wrists, the Apple Watch Ultra or the new larger 46mm Series 10 edition is going to work perfectly fine for you. But what if you're not? What if you're like me and you have tiny, yet still very manly 165mm wrists? Or what if you're like my sister-in-law with tiny 152mm wrists? What then? Would Apple's new larger watches still work? Or are the older, smaller sizes better? Okay, now that I've been using these watches for a few weeks, I have a really good feel for what size watch works best for me, what watch might work for you, and what I like about the Series 10, and maybe more importantly, what I wish were different about the Series 10. But for me personally, I'm a little bit odd just because I have been testing a ton of watches on this channel over the past couple years, and I've really grown used to much larger watches than probably someone of my size would normally wear. But the look and the feel of big bulky watches has been a little bit normalized for me personally, and I've actually been wearing the Apple Watch Ultra for a little over 2 years now. And as my sister-in-law says, that thing's a little bit of a tank. But after a month of wearing the 42mm jet black aluminum Apple Watch Series 10 with the Volt Splash Nike watch band on one wrist and the 46mm jet black aluminum Apple Watch Series 10 with the navy blue trail loop watch band on the other wrist, I'd actually say that the 46mm is the perfect size for me personally. The 46mm does cost a little bit more. It's $400 for the 42mm edition, $430 for the 46mm edition, and then $700 for the 42mm titanium edition, and $750 for the 46mm titanium edition. Now, I do think that if you do have smaller wrists than mine, you're probably gonna want the 42mm edition. That's the one that my sister-in-law was voting for after having worn both of them. But the Series 10 now has a slightly different shape with more rounded corners, and now it's about 10% thinner. It went from 10.7 millimeters in thickness down to 9.7 millimeters in thickness. Here we are comparing the Series 7 41mm edition to the Series 10 42mm edition. And I've said this a million times on this channel, but it really is the thickness of the watch or how high above the wrist these watches sit that really makes these watches feel big and bulky. So a slimmer watch is a very welcome improvement here. But Apple also has completely redesigned the internals of this watch just to make it thinner. They actually haven't made significant performance increases to the internals here. Inside this watch, they have the S10 or System in Package processor chip, and it was redesigned to be thinner. But from what I can tell, most of the brains of the CPU and most of the components of the SIP processor seem to be the same. So, main difference of this watch in the Series 9 isn't really like speed or performance, but more overall design. It's both thinner and wider, making for a slightly larger screen resolution as well. And one of the best ways to pick up on this extra screen real estate is to look at one of the applications, something like the calculator app. Again, here I am comparing the older Apple Watch Series 7, because that's the only older Apple Watch that I happen to have, but comparing that to the Series 10 here, and it does have about an 8 to 10% bump in screen resolution, depending on the size of the model that you pick up. And Apple is actually calling this new screen a wide-angle OLED display. So here's how this display looks at a pretty extreme angle, maybe a 30-degree angle or so, and it does look just a little bit brighter to me. And Apple also mentioned that this new screen was more energy efficient, but instead of giving us more battery life, Apple is telling us that no, a single day is perfectly fine. Instead, that new display is going to have the option to be updated more frequently and can now show the seconds hand. Or in this case, I'm actually using a new watch face called Flux. It has this animation that is showing the seconds, and it's basically inverting, one set of colors to the next with the time being displayed. I actually like this quite a bit, but using it, I actually am seeing some questionable battery life. And it turns out that there has been a bit of a bug within the code here within watch OS 11, causing a little bit of battery life issues. And that actually should be corrected as of watch OS 11.01. It's not unheard of for these big new releases of operating systems to have a few issues that do pretty quickly get sorted out with a .1 release update. But the Apple Watch Series 10 also charges faster than previous models. You can expect up to 80% battery life in as little as 30 minutes of charging. Again, this is going to largely depend on what level of charging this watch is charging from. Just because, any time that you're charging a lithium-ion battery, they're going to tend to charge really fast up until when they get close to 100%, and then they start to charge really, really slowly. I think the easiest way to visualize this, or maybe the best analogy, is to think of like the battery as a parking lot. When it's completely empty, it's super easy to find a spot, moves in super fast. But when it's full, these lithium ions just take significantly more time to find a location. It's also why all of the marketing materials for these companies will give you some stats where they say, from 0 to 80%, and they never really mention how long things take to get to 100%. But again, to get this faster charging, you will want to use Apple's new braided cables. You can actually tell if it's a newer charging puck because it'll have aluminum around the edges of the little charging piece. You'll also find that charger comes with the Apple Watch Series 7 and newer watches. And this faster charging is fantastic because really over the past 2 years, I've gotten completely used to the Apple Watch Ultra, which doesn't need to be charged every day, really only needs to be charged once every 2 or 3 days or so, versus using these Series 10 devices, which really do require setting aside a little bit of time each day to charge these devices. I think for me, that's probably the hardest pill to swallow when switching from the Apple Watch Ultra to the Apple Watch Series 10. Now, I do like to do, some sort of outdoor GPS activity per day, roughly about an hour's worth of GPS activity, if I can. And GPS is another feature, along with things like, listening to music, that can really kill the batteries of these watches. And then as far as GPS accuracy goes, I have had 0 issues when it comes to the GPS accuracy of the Apple Watch Series 10. Now keep in mind that unlike the Apple Watch Ultra, the Apple Watch Series 10 doesn't have dual band GPS, meaning that it's not going to connect to multiple frequencies on satellites, which is something that a lot of these higher end GPS watches can do. For me, I don't actually think it's a huge deal personally. I think that you'll really only find that feature helpful if you are running next to some sort of sheer rock wall, or maybe you're running downtown and you're near some like skyscraper buildings or something like that, and the reflections are really mixing up the GPS signals. But my GPS tracks have been excellent, and it just proves yet again that antenna design and the algorithms that are actually, getting through this GPS data and discarding bad data are significantly more important than having something like dual frequency GPS. Now we should also look at heart rate accuracy. And I actually like to do that by comparing 2 watches with optical heart rate sensors, one on the left wrist, one on the right wrist, and then a third watch that's actually connected to an ECG style chest strap. I'll usually wear that watch on either my hand or sometimes I'll put it on the back of my hat. But I actually tend to consider chest heart rate straps like a bit of like the gold standard when it comes to heart rate accuracy, just because as long as they've got a decent connection to your skin, they can do a pretty good job of picking up on the electrical signal being sent from your heart to signal it to beat. But this optical heart rate sensor, the one on the Apple Watch Series 10, has not been updated. So we should see pretty similar data to what we've seen in the past. And looking at some data here, the Apple Watch Series 10, the heart rate data still looks fantastic. Similar to the Series 9, I would definitely describe this as one of the best heart rate sensors that's on the market currently. Now, if we're honest with ourselves, I don't think that the updates to this Apple Watch Series 10 are massive in comparison to previous editions of the Apple Watch. But some of the biggest upgrades that are coming to this watch are coming in the form of new software. And I've talked a little bit about watchOS 11 on this channel in the past, but within here, there's a new app called Vitals, which you can kind of think of as a centralized hub for those of us who want to keep track of some key health metrics measured while we sleep. And the metrics being tracked here are heart rate, respiratory rate, wrist temperature, blood oxygen, and sleep duration. And blood oxygen is actually very interesting because that's the one metric that might have worked on your Series 9, depending on when you actually bought your Series 9, but currently will not work on your Series 10. If you're in the United States. Let me explain that. Almost a year ago, Apple actually lost a patent dispute, and they actually had to briefly stop selling the Apple Watch Ultra 2 and the Series 9 in the United States. They actually returned these watches to the market a few weeks later with the blood oxygen saturation sensor disabled. So if you are using an Apple Watch purchased after that point, here in the Vitals app, you're just gonna be missing that one metric. But along with the Vitals app, watchOS 11 has a new effort rating score for your workouts. So that's an automatically assigned score based on the duration of your workout and your heart rate during the workout. And that's there to gauge how difficult the workout was. And then after each workout, you can actually adjust that score if you want to. Those scores are actually used to provide the Vitals app with an overall training load where you can actually look at trends and try to avoid big swings in either direction of your training load. It's definitely something that a lot of other sports manufacturers, sports watches and things like that have provided, and it's really fantastic to see Apple start to integrate stuff like that here. Now, I will say that it is interesting that Apple doesn't show you specific training load numbers or metrics in here. To me, it kind of feels like you're getting like a report card from your teacher on how you're doing, but not providing you with any real grades. But at least you can still see a trend line, even if you don't have hard numbers to work with here. And this Apple Watch Series 10 also has a new sleep apnea detection algorithm. Again, I'm kind of surprised that this feature isn't affected by the missing blood oxygen functionality, but now your watch can actually report on breathing disturbances in the Health app. And that app can actually also alert you if it thinks that you have sleep apnea after kind of watching you sleep for 30 days or so. Now there's also a new Translate app in watchOS 11, which I actually find super cool. And then there's also the ability for mapping information when you're offline on your Apple Watch, which is good because you can imagine how helpful that would be if you are out hiking and you're away from cellular connectivity or something like that. But then there's also a new depth gauge for snorkeling on the Apple Watch Series 10. It works down to 20 feet. Oddly, Apple's Depth app actually makes an entirely new activity record for each dive that you do. So each time you come up for air, each time you go down, it's making all of these different activities. But I have a feeling that Apple will probably fix that with a software update at some point. And then there's a new Tides app as well, which provides tide data based on your location. And you can actually look ahead for 7 days. It's pretty cool. And you can actually check surf conditions at over 5,000 different locations with this app. Now, I actually mentioned earlier that compared to the Apple Watch Ultra 2, the Apple Watch Series 10 is still missing multi-band GPS, but it's also missing a few other features from the Apple Watch Ultra. So here's just a quick run through of a few things that you might be missing if you do go with the Apple Watch Series 10 and not like the Apple Watch Ultra 2. Battery life, obviously, you'll get 1 day versus 2.5 days with the Apple Watch Ultra. The Apple Watch Ultra also has an action button, which you can kind of assign to different things, but for me personally, I actually really enjoy having it assigned to workout so that you can quickly start a workout. The Apple Watch Ultra also has a siren, which again, thankfully, I've never had to use other than for testing purposes. The Apple Watch Ultra is also capable of diving down to 40 meters versus the S10, which is limited to 20 feet or about 6 meters. So you can do scuba diving as opposed to snorkeling. And then the Apple Watch Ultra has something called Precision Start, where you can wait for the device to acquire satellites and then swipe over and start your run. That's instead of that, I'm gonna describe it as like super annoying 3, 2, 1, go thing that you get from other Apple Watches. Maybe you like it, but that thing drives me crazy. Only reason is I really feel like Apple should provide all of us with the ability to do that precision start. It seems like it's just software, unless I'm missing something. We should all want to wait for satellite connections too. The 3, 2, 1 thing is bad for a number of reasons. No race organizer is going to wait for you to time your start with your Apple Watch. And even if they did, it wouldn't necessarily mean that the satellites are ready and connected to your watch. So if you are in a new place and satellites are taking a while to get connected, you might have some very bad data for the first mile of your run or bike. I think Apple should fix this, and I don't see any reason why they couldn't move the precision start from the Apple Watch Ultra to the Apple Watch Series 10. Sorry for the side rant there, but the Apple Watch Ultra also has a brighter display. It's 3,000 nits versus 2,000 nits on the Apple Watch Series 10. In reality, both of these watches are extremely bright, even in sunny conditions outdoors. But maybe the biggest and most important reason to consider one over the other is the bigger price tag. The Apple Watch Ultra is about twice the price at $800 versus the Apple Watch Series 10, which you can get for as low as $400. So overall, I was really hoping that Apple was going to have a really unique update with this Apple Watch Series 10. I kind of thought that we might get a new watch body design, or I thought maybe we might get a new watch band attachment piece. And I was really hoping for a little bit of like a new screen technology, some of the stuff that they use on the Apple Vision Pro. But what we got was a tiny size change in a thinner device. And this is not massive. This is not a massive improvement over the Apple Watch Series 9. And maybe that's okay. Maybe we've reached a bit of a plateau here where Apple is pretty happy with the design of the watch, and updates going forward are just gonna be smaller, more incremental changes. It kind of seems like that's the case with the iPhone. But what do you guys think? Are you excited about this Apple Watch Series 10? I think that I'm more excited about what might be coming next. Things like Apple Intelligence, maybe blood pressure monitoring, maybe some way to monitor blood glucose levels. I have no idea what's coming next, but I'm excited to see what they do here. Either way, flashy new Apple Watch or no Apple Watch at all, I really do hope that you're getting out there swimming, biking, running, rinsing, and repeating it all over again. And we will see you guys on the next one.